Well, we're going to continue reading. It's still Monday, but I'm doing Tuesday's reading because I want to go ahead and finish the book and see how it ends. And then I think we'll go ahead and start the final book in the series. So this chapter 37 is called Heading Home. Poppy, Ereth Jr., and Mephitis were moving along an animal trail deep in Dimwood Forest. They were going home. Scat stew with sandpaper, said Ereth to Poppy. How could you have a father like that? Very few creatures get to choose their fathers, Poppy reminded him. Or mothers, added Junior with a belch. You're lucky anyone chose you, returned Poppy. Just remember, you all destroyed that house. Oh, purple pretzel puppies, said the porcupine. It was just a mistake. Just? Miss Poppy, said Mephitis. Really, we didn't mean to. I'm sure, said Poppy with a sigh. Anyway, it turned out okay, said Junior. They all found their own places. You heard 'em. They like it better this way. I suppose a little privacy among families is a good thing, agreed Poppy. Suddenly, Ereth stopped. That reminds me, he said. I have to go somewhere. Where? To find some peace and quiet, bilged Brain. If that's all right with you. Ereth, as always, you may do whatever you like. Right, murmured the old porcupine. He turned to Mephitis. You coming, misfit? Coming where? Cried an alarmed Junior. Mephitis looked about shyly. Ereth said I could live with him in his log. He did, said Poppy, looking first at the skunk and then at the porcupine. But I'm not cleaning up after him, said Ereth, or feeding him, or teaching him, or taking care of him, or talking to him in any way whatsoever unless I want to. And the first time he stinks up the place, or belches, or says freaking, he's out, gone, done, kaput. But then, asked Poppy, trying not to smile too broadly, what are you going to do with him? Mephitis looked to Ereth. Tell her yourself, stick stars, said the porcupine. He's going to teach me to swear, said Mephitis. Poppy ran over to Ereth, stood on her hind legs, and kissed him on the tip of his nose. Then she ran over to Mephitis and did the same. Welcome to our neighborhood, she said. French fried foo balls, Ereth muttered. With crossed eyes focused on the tip of his nose, he plunged into the woods and was quickly lost to view. Mephitis hesitated, looked at Junior, grinned, and said, see you later, pal. Then he trundled after Ereth as fast as his own short legs would take him. Cool, said Junior. This means he'll be living right next to us. As Poppy and Junior resumed their walk, she said, Junior, I do have to ask you something. You've never said what you think of my parents. Oh, yeah. Well, your mother is a wilted flower. Your father is funny, but I don't think he means to be. No, what I mean is, do you think I'm like them? Do you want to be? I don't think so. Well, you aren't, said Junior. No more than I want to be like you or Papa. But I'd like to go back. Poppy stopped. You would? Yeah. See, there was this mouse, name of Laurel. Poppy gazed at Junior. What about her? Oh, I don't know, said Junior, looking everywhere but at Poppy. Sort of wicked. Poppy was sure his red fur turned a shade redder. What's with you? Junior asked, finally getting the courage to look at his mother. Ragweed Jr., have I told you recently how much I love you? Junior laughed. Hey, a mouse has to do what a mouse has to do. Well, I do love you, she cried, and she gave him a hug. After a moment, he returned it. Chapter 38. Another email. To the Dorada Deconstructioncompany.com. Subject: Old Lamont Farmhouse. Went out to the old Lamont place. Bulldozer had been moved. House crushed. Mice smelling like skunks have turned red. They belch a lot too. Something really weird going on there. I suggest you stay away, as long as there are red mice. Anyway. Chapter 39. Poppy's Return. It was late afternoon when Poppy and Junior reached the snag. Mariposa, verbena, and crabgrass were playing out front. Mariposa saw Poppy first. It's Mama and Junior, she cried. In moments, the rest of the family poured out of the snag and clung to Poppy, trying to pull her in as many directions as possible. Rye was there too, standing back but grinning broadly. How'd it go? He called over the squeaky din. It was a smash, said Junior. Not until late that night did Poppy and Rye find a moment to be alone. It was then that she told him all that had happened. Then he asked, was it worth the going? I suppose. But do you know the best thing about going away? Said Poppy. What's that? Coming home, said Poppy, to all of you, especially you. She took up Rye's paw and held it. Side by side, Poppy and Rye watched at a thin crescent moon high in the sky shed faint light over Dimwood Forest. The chirp of crickets counted the quiet moments. Rye, said Poppy after a while. What? I think I'm getting old. Rye leaned over, gave her a nuzzle, and into her ear whispered, you're just changing again. And that is the end of Poppy's Return. Now, one thing neat that Avi put at the end of this book is a reader's theater. And I haven't done a reader's theater with kids at school for a long time. I used to do them all the time when I was a literacy coach. And I think doing reader's theater is probably one of the things that I enjoy the most. So I think when I get back to school, I'm actually going to find out how many kids have been reading along with me. And then I think we will get together and do a reader's theater for some of the classes. We'll do it maybe during the library as kids come to the library, and there's different characters that each one can be, and we can kind of have costumes and scenery, and I think it will just be a lot of fun for us to do together. And also, it's a great way for us to advertise the books to other children, because these books will be on YouTube now for any students to be able to read the Poppy series. And so I'm excited to be able to do a reader's theater. Well, I'm also today going to start the last book. And the last book in this series is called Poppy and Ereth. And I don't notice much change in Poppy, but look at Ereth. His hair and his quills are getting quite gray, so they are definitely aging as we read the books. So, chapter 1. Let me see here real quick how far I'm going to read to get us going on this new book. I think I will read chapter 1 and chapter 2. And maybe even chapter 3, because it's only one page. Chapter 1 in our new book called Poppy and Ereth, The Hard Winter. It was a hard winter in Dimwood Forest. Temperatures were low, snows deep, nights long, and the winds sharp. Most forest animals remained tucked away in their underground homes, burrows, and caves, sleeping or eating the food they had stored the summer before. It was that way too with Poppy and Rye, who kept close and warm deep down among the roots of their old snag, a tall, broken tree stump. Poppy, an elderly deer mouse, had curled herself up into a plump ball of tan fur, her tail wrapped about so that it touched the tip of her pink nose. She was chatting with her husband Rye about some of the events of the past year, their good life together, guiding and watching their children grow and begin families of their own. Her visit to her old house, Gray House, renewing acquaintances with relatives, and happy times with Ereth, the porcupine. As she talked, Rye, a golden mouse, was lying on his back, eyes closed, paws beneath his head, tail occasionally twitching. He was listening to Poppy even as he was contemplating a new poem, something about the cold winter and the past summer. "It's no good," Rye said quietly, suddenly while coming to his feet. "What's no good?" asked Poppy, thinking he was referring to her talking about the family picnic last autumn. "If I'm going to write anything decent about winter," Rye declared, "I need to get out there and experience it." "It's awfully cold," Poppy reminded him, perfectly aware that such practical notions would make no difference to Rye, not when he was thinking about a poem. "I think there's a storm." "Won't be a moment," said Rye, and he headed for the steps that led to ground level. When he reached the snag's open entryway, however, the storm's bitter cold struck with such force that it momentarily took his breath away. Not to be deferred, Rye pushed through the snow that had drifted in and stepped outside. It was difficult to see anything. The snow, bright and whirling, made the land indistinguishable from the sky. Even the forest trees appeared to be trembling shadows. As for sound, the only thing Rye could hear was the yowl of the wind. "Wonderful," he murmured, even as he shivered and stepped forward, sinking deeply into a soft, powdery drift. He brushed the flakes from his eyelashes, and they danced before his eyes like tiny, sparkling diamonds. "Beautiful," he murmured. Rye began to burrow forward with his front paws as he tunneled into the snow. The sounds of the wind faded. The light turned a dull gray. The cold softened. It was as if he were in a cocoon made of winter. Suddenly, he halted. Embedded in the icy tunnel wall was a perfectly preserved green leaf. "Oh my," Rye whispered, gazing at the leaf with joy. "It's from last summer." Rye remained looking at the leaf for a long while. Only when his toes started to become numb did he turn and scurry back down into the snag. "I think I've got a good poem," he announced as he returned to Poppy. "I'm going to call it Ice Leaf." He threw himself down on his back and closed his eyes. After a few moments, he asked, "Do you have any more of your mix?" "What mix?" said Poppy. "That peppermint, elderberry, and honey mix. You know, for coughs." Poppy's brow furrowed. "Why?" "Slight tingle in the old throat," murmured Rye as he concentrated on his poem. That night, a fierce new storm swept in. The wind roared, the temperature plummeted. The two mice snuggled together for warmth. From somewhere far off, they heard a fox baying and an owl hooting. Next morning, when Rye woke, his throat was very sore. He was coughing, too. Coughing badly. Junior brings Ereth some news. A week later, early morning, a mouse called Junior, his fur encrusted with snow, managed to make his way into Ereth's smelly log. The old porcupine was sound asleep, snoring loudly. After a moment's hesitation, Junior patted him on the nose. "Uncle Ereth," he said, "wake up, please." Ereth opened one eye. Who's that?" "It's me, Junior, Poppy's son." Growling ginger snaps. "Isn't it a bit early, isn't it?" "Uncle Ereth, you're Poppy's best friend. I'm sure you'll want to know." "Want to know what?" the porcupine grumbled. "It's Rye, my father. Last night, he died." Ereth jerked up his head. "What?" he cried. "Rye dead? But he's so young." "Well, yes, he was." "Then how?" "You know, Rye," said Junior. "He went out into the storm looking for poetic inspiration. Stayed out too long, developed a cough. The cough worsened and settled in his chest. A fever came on next. The fever became pneumonia. Mama nursed him tenderly, but last night, I'm afraid he died in her paws. She wanted you to know. Sorry, mumbled Ereth. Thanks. Afraid I can't talk more, said Junior, retreating. I need to get back to her. Right, sure. Alone, Ereth scratched his belly. He looked up. He looked down. He closed his eyes and then opened them. He shook his head as if something was initiating an ear or his brain. What's the point of living, he murmured, if all you do is get old and die? Ereth recalled that Poppy's children had gone off with spouses and had families of their own. She would be alone. She needs me, he announced with sudden urgency. Quills rattling, the porcupine heaved himself up and walked unsteadily to the entrance of his log. Once there, he gazed about upon the spotless white landscape. Large white flakes were drifting down with such gentleness that they blended into a soft blanket of thick silence. Resolutely, if slowly, Ereth pushed his way through the high snowdrifts. By the time he reached Poppy's snag, his quills were laden with snow and ice. His eyes were blurred with tears, and his black nose stung from the cold. Since the hole through which Poppy and Rye had entered the snag was too small for Ereth to get through, he had to stop. Poppy, he bellowed, it's me, Ereth. I want to tell you how badly I feel. After what seemed to be a long time, one of Poppy and Rye's daughter, Mariposa, appeared. Oh, hello, Uncle Ereth. Disappointed it was not Poppy, Ereth mumbled. Just wanted to say I'm sorry about Rye. Well, thank you. It is sad. Listen here, I forgot your name. Mariposa. I need to speak to Poppy. Mariposa was silent. Have you some problem with that? Demanded Ereth. Uncle Ereth, Mariposa whispered. Why don't you come back a little later? Poppy is... What? She wants to be alone. Quiet. I'm sure you can understand, but... Uncle Ereth, please. Ereth began to say something, but instead wheeled about and started back through the snow. Halfway home, he paused. Maybe I shouldn't have been so loud. So he did not finish the thought. Back in his log, Ereth shook off the snow and retreated to the far end. I suppose I should have been softer, he murmured as he hunkered down, or expressed more sympathy with some niceness. Dying. It's so stupid. He closed his eyes and sighed. 5 days passed before Ereth went back outside. He searched and scratched about the snowy forest until he found an old pine cone that had a few remaining seeds. Clutching it in his chattering teeth, he lumbered to Poppy's snag. Poppy, he called. Poppy, though no answer came, Ereth waited until he could no longer bear the cold. Leaving the pine cone at the entryway of the snag, he stumbled home. 2 days later, he returned. The pine cone was gone. But when he called for Poppy, there was still no reply. Ereth waited a whole week before making his next visit. When he called for Poppy, still no one answered. This time, Ereth did something he had never done before. He left a bit of his favorite food, salt, by her snag. 2 weeks later, Ereth went back. The salt was exactly where he had left it. Ereth, who was quite capable of passing the whole of winter without speaking to another creature, was anxious. "Poppy," he bellowed, "I have to see you." Poppy appeared. Ereth stared at his friend. She was thin. Her whiskers drooped. Her eyes seemed dull. She kept rubbing her forepaws together as if they were cold. "Yes, Ereth," she said, speaking softly. "Can I help you?" "I just wanted to say I'm really sorry about Rye." "Yes, thank you. It's hard. I left some things. The pine cone. That was very kind. As for the salt, I'm afraid I don't really care for salt. Why don't you take it back? I know how much you love it." Poppy's voice was so low, Ereth could barely hear her words. "I just thought," he stammered, "we might do something too." "Ereth," said Poppy, "I need to be alone for a while." "How come?" "I'd like to spend some time reading Rye's poetry," she said. Eyes welling with tears, she hastily turned and disappeared from view. Ereth stared at the salt, though just to look at it made him salivate. He was not going to take it back. As far as he was concerned, it belonged to Poppy. But otherwise, the porcupine had no choice. He felt compelled to respect Poppy's wishes. "Dancing doorknobs," he murmured as he trudged back home to his log. "I'm supposed to be her best friend. How can she not want to see me? It's if that she's gone away permanently." It was not the cold that made Ereth shiver. It was the thought. Chapter 3, Changes. It's really short. Though the days grew longer, the weather remained bitterly cold and snowy for weeks. Then, like the sudden turn of an aspen leaf in a puff of wind, the weather changed. Skies cleared. The sun became bright. The temperature climbed. Within a few weeks, unseasonable warmth and slashing torrents of rain melted the winter's deepest snow. Streams crusted, mud oozed, tree leaves dripped and dripped. Frogs sang with joy. The rains finally ended, but the heat continued to rise. Spring hardly arrived before it fled. In its place came an early and hot summer, hotter than anyone could remember. Flowers wilted, green shoots collapsed, mushrooms shriveled. Midsummer brought no improvement. Hot, then hotter, dry and drier yet. The forest floor became hard. Grasses turned brown. Tree leaves fell. Creeks turned into empty gullies. No doubt a drought had come to the forest. And in all this time, Ereth did not see Poppy. We're going to stop there. This is kind of a low down in the dumps way for our book to start. I hope it gets better, because this is a little sad. It's not making me happy. I don't know how you guys feel. What do you think's going to happen? I hope it gets better. Have a good evening, and we'll continue reading tomorrow.